Have you ever walked out to your garden, excited to check on your tomatoes, only to find those beautiful little yellow flowers lying dead on the dirt? It is incredibly frustrating, right? You put in all the hard work, but instead of juicy red tomatoes, you are left with empty green stems. Well, what if I told you that your plant is actually dropping its flowers on purpose to save its own life? Today we are going to dive deep into the mysteries of tomato blossom drop. We are going to uncover the hidden reasons why your plants are rejecting their own fruit, and more importantly, I will share the exact secrets you need to stop it from happening ever again. Get ready, because what you are about to learn goes completely against what most beginner gardeners believe. Before we can fix the problem, we need to understand exactly what is happening on a biological level. Blossom drop is not a disease. It is not some mysterious plague wiping out your garden. It is actually a built-in survival mechanism. When a tomato plant experiences severe environmental stress, it has to make a tough choice. It can either use its limited energy to keep growing its roots and leaves to stay alive, or it can risk death by trying to produce fruit. To save itself, the plant will literally sever the tiny green stem connecting the flower to the main branch. The flower dries up, turns brown, and falls away. This process is called abscission. Your plant is basically hitting the panic button. So, to stop the flowers from falling, we have to play detective and figure out exactly what is causing your tomato plant to panic. Let us start with one of the biggest myths in the gardening world. You have probably heard people say that tomatoes absolutely love the heat. The truth is, that is only partially correct. While they do thrive in warm summer weather, there is a very strict limit to what they can handle. When daytime temperatures consistently rise above 85 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, your tomato plants enter a state of extreme stress. Think of it like trying to run a marathon in the middle of a scorching desert. You would probably stop running to save your energy, right? Well, your tomato plant does the exact same thing. It realizes that the environment is too hostile to support new babies, which are the fruits, so it simply shuts down production. To conserve water and energy, the plant will deliberately sever the connection to its own flowers. The blossoms dry up at the stem and drop to the ground. This is a pure survival mechanism. If you live in an area that gets incredibly hot, you might watch helpless as dozens of potential tomatoes simply fall away. But do not worry, because knowing this temperature limit is your first step to fighting back. Later on, we will talk about how you can create an artificial cool-down for your garden, even during a massive heat wave. Now, let us flip the script and talk about what happens when the sun goes down. Nighttime temperatures are actually just as important, if not more important, than daytime temperatures when it comes to tomato flowers. Tomatoes are incredibly picky about their sleep environment. If the temperature at night drops below 55 degrees Fahrenheit, the plant gets too cold. The pollen inside the flower basically becomes sluggish and inactive, meaning pollination cannot happen. On the flip side, if the summer nights are sweltering and the temperature stays above 75 degrees Fahrenheit, the plant never gets a chance to rest and recover from the daytime heat. The pollen becomes sticky and clumps together, making it completely useless. Imagine trying to sleep in a room with no air conditioning during the peak of summer. You wake up exhausted. Your tomato plants feel the exact same way. Without that perfect nighttime window between 60 and 70 degrees, the unpollinated flowers will simply abort and drop off. Another invisible killer of tomato flowers is humidity. This is something many gardeners completely ignore because they are too focused on temperature. The ideal humidity level for a tomato plant is right between 40 and 70%. Why is this so specific? Because it is all about how the pollen moves. If the air is too dry, like in a desert climate, the pollen dries out completely and fails to stick to the female part of the flower. But if the air is too thick and humid, like a tropical jungle, the pollen absorbs that moisture. It becomes heavy, sticky, and clumps up like wet flour. When the pollen cannot fall naturally inside the flower, fertilization fails. And as we now know, an unfertilized flower is immediately dropped by the plant. If you live in a super humid area, making sure your plants are pruned for maximum airflow is absolutely critical to prevent this sticky pollen disaster. Let us talk about exactly how a tomato gets pollinated, because there is a massive misconception here. A lot of people think you absolutely need bees travelling from flower to get tomatoes. But here is a fun fact for you. Tomato flowers are actually self-pollinating. This means every single yellow flower contains both the male and female parts needed to create a fruit. The pollen just needs to drop down from the anther to the stigma within the very same flower. It is a microscopic drop, but it requires movement to happen. If there is absolutely no breeze, that pollen stays trapped. The flower waits and waits for fertilization. When it does not happen, the plant assumes the flower is broken and drops it. So, while bees are wonderful helpers, what your tomatoes really need is a good shake. They need vibration to loosen that pollen and let gravity do its job. This brings us to a brilliant trick you can use if you are growing tomatoes in a greenhouse, indoors, or on a very sheltered patio where the wind does not reach. Since we know the flowers need vibration to release their pollen, you can actually become the bee yourself. One of the best and most unusual gardening tricks is to use an old electric toothbrush. You turn on the electric toothbrush and gently touch the back of the vibrating bristles to the main stem right behind the cluster of flowers. Do this for just 2 or 3 seconds per cluster. The high-frequency vibration perfectly mimics the buzzing of a bumblebee. You might even see a tiny puff of yellow pollen fall like dust inside the flower. By doing this every couple of days during the morning hours, you are guaranteeing pollination. It is a slightly funny thing to do, but your neighbours will stop laughing when they see your massive harvest. Watering is where most gardeners make a fatal mistake that leads directly to blossom drop. Let us talk about overwatering first. It is very easy to look at a drooping tomato plant in the middle of a hot afternoon and assume it is dying of thirst. So, you grab the hose and flood the garden. But if the soil is already wet, you are actually drowning the plant. Tomato roots need oxygen just as much as they need water. When the soil is waterlogged, the roots suffocate, they start to rot, and they completely lose their ability to transport nutrients up to the leaves and flowers. The plant immediately senses this internal collapse. To save itself from drowning, it abandons the energy-intensive process of making fruit and drops all its blossoms. The soil should feel like a damp sponge that has been thoroughly wrung out, never like a puddle of mud. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum is drought stress. Underwatering is a guaranteed way to make your tomato flowers fall off. Tomatoes are composed of over 90% water. When the soil dries out completely, the plant literally stops functioning. The sap stops flowing, the leaves wilt dramatically, and the plant goes into an extreme defensive mode. It will sacrifice anything non-essential to keep the main stem alive. Those delicate yellow flowers are the first things to get cut off. The key to watering tomatoes is consistency. You want to water deeply at the base of the plant, encouraging the roots to grow far down into the earth where the moisture is stable. Shallow, frequent watering only creates weak surface roots that dry out in a matter of hours. A thick layer of organic mulch around the base of the plant is your best friend here, as it locks that precious moisture into the soil. Let us talk about the trap of using too much fertilizer. It is human nature to think that if a little bit of food is good, a lot of food must be incredible. So, gardeners go out and buy heavy nitrogen fertilizers and dump them on their tomatoes every week. This is a huge mistake. Nitrogen is the nutrient responsible for growing green leaves and thick stems. If you give a tomato plant too much nitrogen, it gets confused. It thinks its only job in life is to grow bigger and taller. You will end up with a massive, beautiful, lush green bush that looks like it belongs in a jungle, but it will produce absolutely zero tomatoes. The plant becomes so focused on vegetative growth that it completely ignores reproduction. It will sprout flowers, but because all the energy is going into the leaves, it will drop those blossoms almost immediately. Balance is absolutely critical. So, if high nitrogen is bad for the flowers, what do they actually need? To hold on to their blossoms and develop big, juicy fruits, tomato plants are desperate for phosphorus and potassium. Think of nitrogen as the bricks to build the house, but phosphorus and potassium are the plumbing and electricity that actually make the house functional. Phosphorus is vital for strong root development and the creation of the blossoms themselves. Potassium helps move water and nutrients throughout the plant and is crucial for forming the actual fruit. Once your tomato plant starts showing its first yellow flowers, you need to switch to a fertilizer that is lower in nitrogen and higher in phosphorus and potassium. You can look at the 3 numbers on any fertilizer bag. You want the middle and last numbers to be higher than the first one. This sends a clear chemical signal to the plant that it is time to make babies. Pruning is an essential part of growing healthy tomatoes, especially for indeterminate varieties that keep growing all season. But did you know that pruning too aggressively can actually cause your plant to drop its flowers? Here is why. Every time you cut a branch or a leaf off a plant, you are creating a wound. The plant has to expend valuable energy to heal that wound and fight off potential infections. If you go into your garden and chop off half the foliage in a single afternoon, you send the plant into severe shock. It panics. All the energy that was being directed toward holding onto the blossoms and developing fruit is instantly redirected toward healing the massive trauma you just caused. To prevent this shock, you should follow the 1/3 rule. Never remove more than 1/3 of the plant's total foliage at any one time. Prune a little bit every week, rather than doing a massive haircut all at once. Sometimes blossom drop is actually completely normal and you do not need to panic at all. Tomato plants are incredibly ambitious. Sometimes, when the weather is perfect and the nutrients are balanced, a tomato plant will produce way more flowers than it could ever possibly support. Imagine a single branch with 20 flowers on it. If all 20 of those flowers turned into large tomatoes, the sheer weight would snap the branch in half and destroy the plant. The plant knows its own physical limits. It knows exactly how much fruit it can bring to maturity based on its current root system and leaf canopy. So, it will naturally self-thin. It will select the strongest, best pollinated flowers to keep, and it will purposefully drop the rest. If you see a few blossoms falling, but the plant is otherwise healthy and producing fruit on the other branches, just relax. Your plant is just doing some natural crop management. We need to talk about the tiny, uninvited guests that might be destroying your flowers. Pests are a major cause of blossom drop, and the worst part is, you might not even see them until it is too late. Insects like aphids, thrips, and spider mites absolutely love to hide inside the delicate yellow flowers and on the undersides of the leaves. These pests are equipped with microscopic needle-like mouths. They pierce the tender tissue of the plant and suck out the sugary sap. This literally drains the lifeblood from the flower. It weakens the blossom so much that the plant simply lets it go. If you are experiencing heavy blossom drop, take a magnifying glass out to the garden. Gently tap a flower over a piece of white paper. If you see tiny specks scurrying around on the paper, you have a pest problem. Treating them early with organic insecticidal soap or neem oil is the only way to save your future harvest. Disease is another massive stress factor that forces a plant to abandon its fruit. Tomatoes are notoriously susceptible to fungal infections like early blight, septoria leaf spot, and powdery mildew. These diseases usually start at the bottom of the plant, where water splashes dirt up onto the lower leaves. As the fungus spreads, it destroys the plant's ability to photosynthesize. The plant realizes it is slowly starving to death because its solar panels, the leaves, are dying. In a desperate bid to survive the infection, it halts all reproductive efforts. The blossoms turn pale, dry out, and fall to the ground. Preventing disease is always easier than curing it. You must space your plants far enough apart to allow wind to blow through the leaves. You must also prune away the bottom branches so they do not touch the soil. A healthy, disease-free plant will hold on to its flowers much longer. Let us revisit the heat issue and talk about a highly effective physical solution. When we talked about temperatures over 90 degrees causing blossom drop, you might have wondered what you were supposed to do about the weather. You cannot control the sun, right? Actually, you can. One of the best investments you can make for your garden is a roll of shade cloth. Think of it as sunscreen for your plants. During a massive heat wave, you can drape a 30% shade cloth over your tomato plants using a few simple wooden stakes. This material allows enough sunlight through for the plant to continue growing, but it filters out the intense, burning ultraviolet rays. A good shade cloth can literally drop the ambient temperature directly around your plants by 10 to 15 degrees. This artificial cool-down is often exactly what the plant needs to keep its pollen viable and hold on to those precious blossoms until the heat wave passes. Inconsistent care is a silent killer in the garden. Plants, much like humans, absolutely thrive on routine. They want to know exactly what to expect from their environment. If you are a weekend gardener who completely forgets about your plants from Monday to Friday, you are creating a yo-yo effect. The soil goes from bone dry and cracking to completely flooded and waterlogged. The nutrient levels spike when you fertilize and then plummet to zero. This roller coaster of extreme conditions exhausts the plant. It never feels secure enough in its environment to commit to growing fruit. The stress hormones inside the tomato plant are constantly spiking. If you want to stop blossom drop, you need to establish a steady rhythm. Check the soil moisture every single morning. Set up a simple drip irrigation system with a cheap timer if you are too busy. Stability in the root zone equals stability in the flowers. While it is not a direct cause of immediate blossom drop, a lack of calcium in the plant plays a massive role in reproductive failure. You might have heard of blossom end rot, where the bottom of the tomato turns black and nasty. That is a calcium issue. But long before the fruit forms, calcium is needed to build strong cell walls in the flowers. If the plant cannot move calcium up to the blossoms, the structural integrity of the flower weakens. Here is the trick though. There is almost always plenty of calcium in your soil. The problem is that calcium moves very slowly and it can only be transported through water. If you let the plant dry out, the calcium transport completely stops. This is another reason why deep, consistent watering is mandatory. Without water acting as the delivery truck, the calcium never reaches the flowers, leading to weak blossoms that easily break off in the wind. Sometimes, the brutal truth is that you are simply growing the wrong plant for your specific environment. Variety selection is half the battle. If you live in a deep southern climate where the summers are brutally hot and humid, and you try to grow a delicate heirloom tomato that originated in the cool mountains of Russia, you are going to fail. That plant is genetically programmed to drop its flowers the second it gets hot. It is not your fault, it is just biology. If you struggle with blossom drop every single year, you need to research heat-tolerant varieties. Look for tomatoes with names like Heatmaster, Solarfire, or Everglades. These modern hybrids and specific wild types have been selectively bred to keep their pollen viable and hold on to their flowers even when the temperature pushes close to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Choosing the right genetic tool for the job is the smartest thing a gardener can do. Are you growing your tomatoes in pots or containers? If so, you need to pay extra close attention because container gardening makes blossom drop much more likely. When a tomato is planted directly in the earth, its roots are insulated by thousands of pounds of cool soil. But in a container, the roots are entirely exposed to the ambient air temperature. If you are using cheap black plastic pots, they will absorb the heat of the summer sun and literally cook the roots inside. The soil in a pot also dries out 3 times faster than the ground. This combination of baked roots and rapid dehydration sends the plant into immediate shock, causing it to drop every flower it has. If you must grow in containers, switch to light-coloured fabric grow bags. The fabric allows the roots to breathe, and the light colour reflects the sun, keeping the root zone drastically cooler and saving your blossoms. Let us talk about the magic of companion planting and how it can save your tomato flowers. You do not have to fight the battle for pollination all by yourself. You can draft an army of helpers by planting the right things next to your tomatoes. Marigolds, borage, and basil are absolute magnets for native bees and bumblebees. Why do we want bumblebees specifically? Because bumblebees perform something called buzz pollination. They literally grab onto the tomato flower and vibrate their flight muscles at a specific frequency that knocks a massive amount of pollen loose. It is far more effective than the wind. By creating a diverse, flower-rich environment right next to your vegetable beds, you draw in these essential pollinators. The more buzzing activity you have around your tomato plants, the higher the chance that every single flower gets perfectly fertilized before it has a chance to drop off. Finally, the most important tool you need to fight blossom drop is patience. When a gardener sees those yellow flowers falling, the initial reaction is usually panic. They rush out and dump chemical fertilizers, blast the plant with the hose, and prune it heavily, all in the same afternoon. This panic reaction actually makes the problem 10 times worse by stacking multiple stressful events onto an already struggling plant. When you see blossom drop, take a deep breath. Evaluate the weather. Is there a heat wave passing through? If so, do nothing except keep the soil consistently moist. Provide a shade cloth if you can. Once the weather breaks and the nighttime temperatures return to normal, the plant will naturally reset itself. It will push out a brand new cluster of flowers, and this time they will stick. Gardening is a marathon, not a sprint. Give the plant time to recover, and it will reward you. So, there you have it. The shocking truth is that tomato blossom drop is not a disease, but a desperate cry for help from a stressed-out plant. We have uncovered that everything from scorching daytime heat and sticky summer nights to drowning the roots or suffocating them in dry soil can cause your plant to abandon its babies. But here is the massive twist. You are entirely in control. By using a simple shade cloth, switching your watering routine, checking for pests, and maybe even using an electric toothbrush to play the role of a bumblebee, you can force your plant to hold on to those flowers. The secret lies in creating a stable, perfectly balanced environment where the plant feels safe enough to produce fruit. Do not let another potential harvest dry up and fall into the dirt. If this video helped you solve your tomato troubles, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. I would love to hear from you, so drop a comment below and tell me, what is the biggest gardening struggle you are facing this season? Keep your hands dirty and happy gardening.